These are our rest of season rankings for fantasy football. We're going to do this just like we do the ultimate rankings where we rank every single position group. However, instead of the weekly rankings, this is going to be for weeks 11 through 17 to get you through the rest of your fantasy football season. Let's start here in the S tier for running backs. And this is going to be a fairly big S tier, but we're going to start with Derrick Henry and Saquon Barkley. Both of these guys have been in the S tier pretty much all year now, and they're going to remain in the S tier for the end of the season here. Devon Achane jumps up because he's been way more productive with Tua in the game than without him, and so we're going to keep Devon Achane up here in the S tier. Bijan, 5 straight 20-point games in a row in full-point PPR leagues, so you like to see that. He's the running back 3 in the season. Kyren Williams, I think, is, after last night, probably the running back, let's see, he's running back 7 or 8, I bet. But he is going to be S tier for us just because of the amount of volume he still continues to get. And the last guy is going to be Alvin Kamara. And Alvin Kamara obviously been very dominant. They just fired their coach. But clearly, as you saw in the first game without him, he still had 16 points on 6 targets. So it's not really going to change. So all of these guys are guys that you feel really good about having on your team as you go into the later parts of the season.
Yep. Then in the A tier, this honestly you could consider like a little S2 tier, honestly, because of the upside that some of these guys carry. Joe Mixon is going to be one of those guys. He's just getting a ridiculous amount of volume and opportunity in Houston. I think Nico Collins coming back healthy is actually going to open up the field a little bit for him again, where he can get some more explosive big playability again. He's just been phenomenal this season in an offense that's really started to cater their style of play towards what he's able to do on the grounds. Then you've got Jahmyr Gibbs, who's really come into his own. Kenneth Walker, who's just looked phenomenal when he's on the field. Jonathan Taylor hasn't looked too great, honestly, and he hasn't shown like an elite level ceiling since he's come back healthy, but his floor is so good because he gets so much volume, and he's getting some breakaway runs as well behind one of the better offensive lines in the league. And then Josh Jacobs, he is a touchdown away from scoring 20-plus points, and if he doesn't score a touchdown, he has such a nice floor of like 12 to 15 points any given week because he's getting so much volume. Breece Hall going to be a lot more boom bust, but man, his boom weeks are good enough for him to potentially finish still as a top 6 to 7 running back in fantasy this year if he can still have some good weeks for the rest of the season. So he has fallen down our rankings notably for the rest of the season, but again, it's nothing really against him as a talent. That offense is just, they're going nowhere.
At the top of the B tier, we're going to have Aaron Jones. Aaron Jones has been fairly productive without scoring touchdowns. Obviously, the main thing for Aaron Jones is his health, but this is projecting he stays healthy the rest of the season. He had come back into the game last week, so he's going to be at the top here. James Cook, he started hotter than he actually has ended up, but with that being said, he is still, I think, a running back 1 in the season. He's a running back 10. He is still seeing the same amount of work he was seeing at the beginning. You have seen a little bit of touchdown decline, but I still think he is a really solid option for your fantasy team. James Conner as well. James Conner on the season is the running back 8. We're going to bump him down a little bit just, with lower than 8 because you have a couple guys like Christian McCaffrey jump him, but also you've got Trey Benson and Amari DiMercado. They are taking a little bit of work from James Conner, a little bit more consistently than they were, but Conner's still a guy you're starting every week. Chase Brown, obviously, you've seen in the 2 games without Zach Moss, Chase Brown 22 and 26 points where he's gotten 80+% of snaps. They brought in Khalil Herbert, but Khalil Herbert, I think while he is going to get some snap share, I don't think it's going to be more than probably 20-30%. And Chase Brown has been ultra productive. He's gotten 5 and 11 targets in each of his last 2 games, so he is a very good option the rest of the season. DeAndre Swift has kind of hit a little bit more of a wall. It kind of decreased the last 4 weeks, 21, 18, 14, and then 7 points last week, but he did play New England. Now, the main thing for DeAndre Swift is he has a really tough rest of season schedule. Weeks 15 through 17 playing Minnesota, Detroit, and Seattle, but he does play Minnesota in week 12 as well, so he has a pretty tough schedule for the rest of the season. He has been very productive so far. He is the wide receiver 18 on the year. And then we're going to go to David Montgomery here. Montgomery, kind of the same thing. He was getting more touchdowns to start the year. He is still the running back 14 on the year, and he has had his bye week. He's still getting anywhere from 12 to 15 carries a game, and you still see the 2 to 3 targets a game as well. But like I said, he had a touchdown in his first 5 games, and in his last 4 games, he's only had a touchdown in half of those games. So it's really going to depend on touchdowns for Monty, but you do see he has a floor of 8 to 12 points, which just does make him a starting option in your fantasy football leagues, but he's going to round out the B tier.
Top of the C tier is going to be Chuba Hubbard. I know this is going to be a little bit debatable. Some people will hate us for this ranking. Some people will say that it's too high, honestly. And with Chuba, he is the RB6 on the season through the first 10 weeks of the year, which is insane. That being said, Jonathan Brooks is going to start to get, his workload is going to get ramped up. It's not going to be much to start, but it'll continue to ramp up. We just have questions about Carolina's offense as a whole, obviously, and we're just not going to rely on that situation overall. But again, very worthy of him being at the top of the C tier. You're starting him, flexing him every single week. He's a great option, has some big playability and receiving upside as well. Tyron Tracy and J.K. Dobbins, very similar types of situations where they have the ability to be productive, and they've demonstrated that. Tyron Tracy really on the rise, taking over the lead role in the Giants' backfield over Singletary. But these are all just offenses that are kind of Herbert's really coming into his own as a passer. He's looking better. Dobbins is starting to split carries again with guys like Gus Edwards there as well. Brian Robinson not going to have the ceiling that Chuba, Tracy, and Dobbins have, but he does have a way higher floor than I think guys like Tracy and Dobbins do. Tony Pollard, same sort of situation, though his volume is not going to be 27 carries every single week like it was against New England. Tyjae Spears is now back healthy, and he's starting to get more opportunity there. Rachaad White, it's really tough to know what to do with him because he's had really good weeks, he's had really bad weeks. Bucky Irving and him have both been productive at the same time. Rachaad White, really an even split between him and Bucky. Bucky maybe even the slight majority from a carries perspective, but Rachaad White's literally being utilized as a wide receiver, a dump-off option for Baker Mayfield in the passing game. And with Godwin and Evans out, that just bodes really well for Rachaad White's production. He's been great the past month.
Let's talk about Najee Harris at the top of this next year. Najee has been more productive recently as the Steelers' offenses got better. The problem is his rest season schedule is abysmal. I mean, it's really bad. Cleveland, Cincinnati, Cleveland, Philadelphia, Baltimore, Kansas City, and Cincinnati.
Yikes.
The rest of the season. I mean, it's really not good. So Najee is going to be somebody we're being a little bit careful with. Ramondre Stevenson, he's the running back 21 on the year, and he has been a little bit hit or miss. You see him have 20-point games where he scores touchdowns, and when he doesn't, 4-point game, 8-point game, 8-point game. So really is kind of touchdown dependent in that offense where you really don't have a ton of upside outside of the touchdowns. We're going to put Isaiah Pacheco here. He's obviously been out for the last 7 weeks, but we do project him to come back at the end of November, and when he does come back, he's going to, from a point scoring standpoint, he is going to project better than almost all these guys, and even the guys in this year above him.
Just don't know
you
when
do
he's
have to
gonna be
factor
back.
in that you don't know when he's going to be back. Rico Dowdle, that offense got considerably worse with losing Dak Prescott, and he had 8 points in his first game without Dak against the Philadelphia Eagles defense. The rest of the season isn't bad for him, and the playoffs actually faces Carolina, Tampa Bay, and Philadelphia. So it's kind of a mixed bag there, but Rico is really just victim of being in a bad offense that just lost their quarterback. Bucky Irving is still kind of hit or miss. You don't really feel super comfortable starting him because he does have weeks where he has 6 points and he has weeks where he has 17 points. Now, I will say of the last 5 games, it's been 18, 16, 15, 6, and 17. I just don't expect that to necessarily carry on because of 3 of the 4 games there where he was scoring in double digits, he had touchdowns in 3 of the 4 games. So when you've seen him not have a touchdown, he has been significantly less productive, and he's not getting any more than really 3 targets a game right now. And so I think his floor is going to be a little bit lower than Rachaad White's rest of the season. And then Kareem Hunt really filling in until Isaiah Pacheco gets back, but Kareem Hunt has obviously been very solid this season. And so as long as he's on the field, he's getting so many touches. And also he had 10 targets last game. He's going to get so much volume that you have to plug him into your lineups until Pacheco comes back, and then he's probably useless at that point.
Yeah. Then the F tier is just going to be a bunch of guys that are either in committees or backing up solid running backs in front of them, or guys like Nick Chubb who are just their workload is going to be ramped up. Chubb is really just an enigma at this point. We don't know what he's going to do in that offense, what he's capable of coming off of that devastating injury last year. Jonathan Brooks, don't know what his volume is going to look like rest of the year. ETN and Bigsby, how is that going to continue to divvy up with those touches and those opportunities in an offense that really is fading down the stretch? We don't know. Austin Eckler, kind of touchdown or bust. How is he going to do alongside B-Rob? Can his production be sustainable with B-Rob on the field? Again, we don't know. Javonte Williams has now been usurped by Audric Esme in that offense, we believe. So that really is up in the air. Alexander Madison, same sort of situation. Awful offense. Singletary behind Tracy. So Raheem Mostert, I'll just close out the G tier as well. Again, a bunch of backup level running backs here. Warren, Charbonnet, Braylon Allen, Algier behind Brees and Bijan. You've got Benson behind Connor, 1 injury away. Jerome Ford behind Chubb, and he'll be back from a hamstring hopefully at some point. Mason behind McCaffrey. So again, none of these guys you're starting or flexing really any given week. If you are, you're desperate, and your season probably isn't looking too good.
All right, let's jump over to wide receivers now, and let's start the S tier. I did shrink the S tier a little bit here. I really don't think there's anybody that's touching Jamar Chase or Justin Jefferson right now. Jamar Chase has honestly been really even almost in a tier of his own. He's almost like S1 and S2 here between Jefferson and Chase. But Jefferson has kind of been consistent outside of this last game that he's played. So both of these guys are going to be S tier. I'll knock out the A tier as well. A.J. Brown, Nico Collins, and Amon-Ra St. Brown will start off this tier. Nico obviously sliding back into these rankings because he is going to be coming back healthy by the time the next games are played. And he's going to be up here with A.J. Brown. A.J. Brown obviously missed a couple games this season, but since he's been on the field, has been very productive, as has Amon-Ra St. Brown. I'm pretty sure Amon-Ra St. Brown, and so this is in 15 points in his last game was A.J. Brown. Obviously, we're going to project him to score a little bit more than he has the last couple games. He did miss half the Jacksonville game, though. Amon-Ra has scored a touchdown in 7 straight games now. Now, he is only putting up, he's the wide receiver 6 on the year. He's putting up, anywhere from 18 to 20 points right now pretty consistently. He's not really getting a ton of targets like you saw last year. His targets have kind of dropped off, but he has scored a touchdown. That's what happens when you score a touchdown once a game. Like legit, it's almost like they're scheming it now. So he's going to be here. Tyreek Hill. Hopefully, Tyreek Hill is going to be back on track after his last game against the Los Angeles Rams, where he did have a touchdown. But with Tyreek, you basically just have to acknowledge the upside when you're ranking him. Drake London is the wide receiver, 4 on the year? So Drake London honestly could even be higher than this. Puka Nacua. Puka, again, you got to hope Puka stays healthy, but when he's healthy, he's going to be up here with Cooper Kupp. Both these guys are going to be A-tier options for the rest of the season for sure.
Yep. Then in the B tier, you're going to have Neighbors, who, again, if you want to blindly follow targets, follow Malik Neighbors and don't give up on him too early, too soon. I still think he has elite level upside potentially if he can start to turn this into what he was doing earlier in the year. But again, that offense is so bad. Daniel Jones is so bad. That's why he's not going to be in the A tier with the other guys. Garrett Wilson is going to be in this tier as well. He's had some great games. Devontae Adams, obviously in that offense, can't trust the Jets overall. CeeDee Lamb has taken a significant knock with Dak going out. His ceiling is just capped. If you look at the splits between his production with Dak versus his production on the field with Cooper Rush, it's night and day from a ceiling and upside perspective. CeeDee's still going to get volume. He's just not going to have the yak and the big playability that he does with Dak. DK Metcalf, Terry McLaurin, Zay Flowers, these remaining 3 guys in this tier have wide receiver 1 upside any given week. They're going to have some down weeks, maybe DK and Flowers more than McLaurin. Terry's actually been one of the most consistent guys this season, but every single one of these guys has great upside for the rest of the year, and I'm super pumped to see what DK can do back coming healthy, or coming back healthy, and then Zay Flowers with they're adding more and more weapons with Deontay coming in there, and that's really, I think, helped open up the field for Flowers to be productive as well.
Let's talk about Mike Evans. I mean, obviously Mike Evans, I think he's coming back after the bye week. When he does come back, this is a guy that projects to be a fringe top 12 guy every week. So I think when he's healthy, you have to put him here. Marvin Harrison Jr. has been kind of hit or miss. You have to put him and Pickens back to back at this point because Pickens has really picked it up recently, while Marvin Harrison Jr. really like when Marvin Harrison Jr. has a touchdown, he's very productive. When he doesn't, I mean, there are a lot of games where he's had some games with 5 targets. He's had some games with 11, 7, 8 targets. So it's kind of, the main thing for me with Marv is the last 4 games, 6, 7, 5, and 5 targets. Again, he's having 5 and 3-point games every other game at this point because he's not getting enough targets to maintain a high enough floor. So he's going to have to be ranked here. He's a wide receiver 17 on the season, so we've got him pretty close. Pickens, on the other hand, I mean, Pickens at this point, he's the wide receiver 18. So they are literally back to back in terms of production. However,
he's on the up.
Pickens is on the up, and he's getting consistent target volume. So Devonta Smith, again, with Devonta, he has been good this season, the wide receiver 22. This is where I expect Devonta to produce. He, again, has a pretty low floor, but you have seen him have big playability that we know he has, and somebody that you feel comfortable flexing the rest of the season. Devontae Adams has had a lot of targets since he joined the Jets. In his last 4 games, 9, 6, 11, and 13 targets. I do think that Devontae has some pretty high upside and a high floor because of that. Really, his floor is 9 points is what you've seen since he's been with the Jets. And if he does start scoring touchdowns at all, I think you could see him improve on this ranking. But right now, Garrett Wilson's straight up outplaying him. Deebo Samuel, obviously the upside is there with Deebo, and he's going to be playing alongside Christian McCaffrey. I think Christian McCaffrey helps Deebo rest of the season. And then we're going to wrap it up here with Jaden Reed. And Jaden Reed, I think, if I'm not mistaken, he's wide receiver 2, wide receiver 13 on the season right now. But he hasn't had his bye week yet. So after his bye week, he'll be like a mid-wide receiver 2, and that's about where we project him rest of the season.
Yep. And the D tier, you're going to have Darnell Mooney at the top. You can make an argument to have him in the C tier, honestly. I think with Mooney, he's obviously playing the wide receiver 2 role alongside Drake London, but honestly, it doesn't really matter when Kirk Cousins is throwing the ball. He is the wide receiver 8 on the season through the first 10 weeks of the year. That's insane. I still can't even believe that. But also, who would have thought that Kirk Cousins was going to be able to help Bijan, Mooney, and London produce, and even Pitts sometimes as well. The passing volume there is ridiculous. Mooney is a bomb ready to explode every single week. D-Hop still finding his way in that offense consistently for the Chiefs, but again, I think he's going to be fine for the rest of the season. He is, in my opinion, going to be more touchdown dependent, boom bust. But again, he's such a threat in the red zone. I think those opportunities are just naturally going to come. Josh Downs, you can make an argument for him to be higher as well. I think this is right around where he belongs because you just don't know what the situation in Indy is going to look like for the rest of the season. If they end up going back with Anthony Richardson, that's an automatic knock on everyone in that offense. It's just really tough to tell with Josh Downs. But, man, when he is playing and getting accurate targets, he's capitalizing and he's incredibly productive. T. Higgins, Tank Dell, and Jacoby Myers at the tail end of this tier, all wide receiver 2s. Jacoby Myers playing the one role, but he's going to produce as a wide receiver 2 for the rest of the season, I believe. And they all have decent outlooks. Higgins got to stay healthy. Tank Dell, I think, is going to be helped by Nico Collins coming back healthy. And then Jacoby Myers, we just need to pray that Desmond Ridder is not the quarterback for the Raiders the rest of the season.
This is, of course, I get the tier where I'm going to get yelled at for this. But Brian Thomas, I feel like I'm going to get yelled at for this because he's a wide receiver 1 so far, but I don't feel like I should get yelled at this. The situation is drastically worse. Going from Trevor Lawrence to Mac Jones is a huge downgrade. Yeah, you can say, well, Trevor Lawrence hasn't been good. Well, for fantasy, he hasn't. And as a real-life QB, considering the situation, Trevor Lawrence wasn't as bad as people were making him out to be. And it really hurts Brian Thomas. Brian Thomas' last 4 games, 5, 4, 4, and 3 targets. Again, he only had 22 and 15 in the first 2 of those games because he had a touchdown. He had 3 targets in his first game without Trevor Lawrence, and his schedule the rest of the season is awful. It is a very hard schedule. So Brian Thomas, I expect him to fall off for the rest of the season until Trevor Lawrence comes back next year. JSN is the wide receiver 14, but do keep in mind, 37 of his points came in week 9, and 23 of his points came in week 2. Outside of those 2 games, he hasn't scored more than 15 points in a game. So you really have seen his 2 games where he's had extremely high targets and had 2 touchdowns in the case of one game, and it was 12 receptions in the other game. Those have really skewed his averages. And in a year where now we've seen some weaker wide receiver play, JSN has been able to take 2 very high volume, very high scoring games and prop himself up as what appears to be a high end wide receiver 2. 2 things though. He hasn't had his bye week, and the targets have still been hit or miss, and he's been playing without DK the last couple games. DK is going to come back. So JSN, I feel like there are plenty of reasons to justify putting him here. Amari Cooper, Calvin Ridley, both veterans that are going to be playing on teams where Amari Cooper obviously has the better situation, but he does have more competition. Calvin Ridley, you could put Calvin Ridley a little bit higher on this list. He has been on the up, and he is a high-end wide receiver 3 as of making this video. 22, 12, and 25 points in his last 3 games. And he does have a pretty good playoff schedule. So honestly, Calvin Ridley, you want to put him higher than this, I'm okay with that. DJ Moore, we just want DJ Moore to do something. In reality, he's not really doing anything. Wide receiver 31 on the season. He hasn't had a game in double figures since week 5 against Carolina. It's not great. Ladd McConkey continues to kind of step up here as well as Cedric Tillman. Both of these guys, young guys. McConkey's the wide receiver 21 on the season. Tillman's wide receiver 64, but last 3 games, really the only 3 games, 18, 28, and 20 for Tillman. I mean, Tillman, heck,
wide receiver 1 in that 3-week stretch.
And so we're being conservative with Tillman. Who knows where Tillman ends up? I mean, who knows if
he's the biggest wild card on this list.
He is a huge wild card. So don't get mad about Tillman's ranking. You can rank him anywhere. We'll be like, I mean, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know.
Sure.
So,
yeah.
Whatever.
Sutton going to be at the top of the G tier. He's shown some really, really great upside and ability in an offense that has looked a lot better than expected. He's very boom bust. He does have a cap ceiling. You just don't know in that offense. Khalil Shakir, very similar situation. Again, he's an exclusive slot wide receiver. He can have a really big game. He can have a really mid game. He can have a really bad game. You just don't know with him. But again, all of these guys are pretty solid flex options. Jalen Waddle finally showed up against the Rams on Monday Night Football. So that was encouraging to see him get some work and some big playability. But again, he's still going to stay in this range where we expect him to be rest of the season. Very similar type of situations to Jameson Williams, who has really regressed back to what we thought he was going to be heading into the season, which is about 4 to 5 targets a week.
Imagine that. Imagine that.
That was our. Why do we always overreact about the Lions?
I don't know.
This time we were like, we'll take her out. Yeah. And then Keon Coleman, the same thing as Shakir again, but the total opposite, where he's not the slot wide receiver, right? He's going to be less target volume, more boom bust every single week because he's big play or he's nothing, and he's injured, banged up, so we don't know when he's going to come back. Already declared to be out against the Chiefs in week 12 or week 11. 11 or whatever week we're in at this point. But that'll be the G tier for you.
In the last year here, Rome Odunze has been a little bit better recently, but the Bears, the offensive line, it's not a good situation there, honestly. Pittman, I have nothing to say about. Romeo Doubs,
Good.
Hit or miss, but I'm trying to think. Romeo Doubs, he did miss the game because he, quit or whatever. But he is,
Yeah.
the targets are all over the place with Doubs. See, these are all kind of guys.
It's so on brand
Juwan
for
Jennings.
Doubs.
Jennings does project better than this rest of the season, I think. So if you wanted to move him up in the rankings here, that's good. Worthy continues to be very low target. I think DeAndre Hopkins pretty much makes him unstartable rest of the season, in my opinion. Deontay Johnson, I don't think he's relevant at all. Honestly, freaking don't put Deontay Johnson in the rankings, please. Chris Olave, we both have him ranked. I don't freaking think he's playing this year. Chris Olave, and then Jordan Addison. In case Chris Olave comes back, and Jordan Addison, obviously, as a high upside guy. But let's go to tight ends, talk about the S tier. Kittle, Bowers, Kelsey, the three best tight ends. Three guys, if you have them, you lock down a good tight end for the rest of the year. Feel really good about them. You start them every week.
Yep. A tier, we got McBride, Hawkinson, and Ott, and I feel really good about this tier. McBride's going to be very consistent. He's going to get consistent volume. If he doesn't score a touchdown and doesn't have a couple big plays, he's still going to get you like 10 to 12 points every single week. He's looking great. Hawkinson, second game back from an ACL and MCL tear. He drops 15 points and gets 9 targets. He is literally perfect for Sam Darnold in that offense right now. And then Cade Otton is just truly the definition of a vacated volume asset on an offense that passes the ball a lot. So he's looked pretty good. Baker's going to keep getting him the ball.
Yeah, you do have Mike Evans coming back to that offense here pretty soon, too.
Yeah, that's why we dropped him down a couple spots.
Yeah. Mark Andrews, he's been playing better. It's just a matter of whether he stays on the field consistently. Still, I'm only really getting 50% snap share with Likely.
And a definition
but with
of
Likely
touchdown
out,
or bust.
yes, and that's the other thing. So we had to move him up. Ingram, on the other hand, you talk about Brian Thomas Jr. Ingram, without Trevor Lawrence in his first game, still had 8 targets and had 10 points in full point PPR leagues. So I think he does still project good the rest of the season. Kyle Pitts is going to be a little bit boomer bust, I think, and he kind of has been so far this year. Obviously, games of 2 and 9 points in the last couple of games after games of 25 and 13 the 2 games before that. So who knows? Targets have been a little bit all over the place. Darnell Mooney has been, the primary beneficiary of this second number of targets there, second to Drake London, obviously. David Njoku and Tucker Kraft. Njoku, his targets have been sky high so far without Deshaun Watson, who we learned was the worst quarterback ever to play in the NFL, apparently. This is new to me, but Njoku the last couple games, 7, 14, and 7 targets. So, and I think, if I had to guess, he's going to get around 7 targets a game.
Yeah.
So, and he's been pretty productive with those targets as well. So we'll see. Yeah. And then Kraft has been, I think he's been another guy really. He has the tight end 7 on the season. He's had 4 games with touchdowns, 1 game with multiple touchdowns. In the games where he doesn't have touchdowns, 3 points, 7 points, 4 points, 3 points, and 5 points.
Literally Mark Andrews.
So he's literally Mark Andrews too. So both of these guys are, and everybody in this tier, if you have them, you pretty much feel good about starting him every week, and it gets pretty dicey after this.
Yeah, so in the C tier, it's just a bunch of guys who have been underwhelming, starting with Dalton Kincaid. He just has not had the upside that we expected in an offense that we thought was really going to lean on him, and he's still coming along. And I think for the rest of the year, this is where you're expecting him to produce. Hunter Henry is right around the same production as Dalton Kincaid. He's been a little more consistent, I think, from a target volume perspective. Sam Laporta finally had a productive day, had a 15-point game against Houston, had 6 targets, which was tied with the most that he had against Tennessee 2 weeks before. So I wouldn't even say a good sign for him outside of the 3 games he scored a touchdown. He scored 8, 3, 5, 9, 3, and 4 points, and he's just not getting consistent volume. It's awful. Jake Ferguson, a little bit on the up because Cooper Rush is there, and he's going to have to lean on his easiest targets, and that is for the tight end, Jake Ferguson there. But again, very limited upside. Cole Kmet, Pat Frymuth, all second, third options on their offense. Not really looking bright for either of those guys upside-wise for the rest of the season. And then the D tier, I'll just finish it out here. Goddard, touchdown or bust. Ertz had a nice little stretch there. It's just not sustainable with the rushing upside. B-Rob coming back and Terry being so dominant. You got Schultz and Font and Gesicki at the end as well. Gesicki, honestly, you could put up higher. I don't really care. He's also the
depends on T. Higgins.
Third or fourth option in his offense as well, production-wise, so it does depend on T.
Let's go to quarterbacks now. S tier, 2 words, rushing upside. You've got Jackson, Daniels, Allen, and Hurts are going to be here. You're starting them every week.
Yep. And then the A tier, you're going to have Burrow, who's just gone nuclear the last few weeks. Kyler Murray, who's just looks better and better every single week and is really starting to figure it out in that offense. Brock Purdy is literally, I think, outside of Lamar Jackson, the most consistent quarterback by far this year. He's going to finish as a top 6 quarterback, honestly. Jordan Love and Baker Mayfield have sustained decent success as well, despite some injuries, not only to themselves like Jordan Love, but also the team. For Baker Mayfield being Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, he's still sustained success and productivity. So beats here. We'll start with Bo Nix.
Bo Nix, quarterback 9. Kirk Cousins, quarterback 11. Patrick Mahomes, quarterback like 20 something. But the point is, Nix and Cousins are guys that you seriously like. They have been really good. You're starting them this year. Like that's where they are. Pat Mahomes, I was obviously exaggerating there. He's the quarterback 13 on the year. So he's moved back up a little bit after a couple, 16, 24, 19 point games here.
He's very consistent. We'll give him that.
Yeah,
he just doesn't really have much upside.
Sam Darnold he definitely looked like he fell back down to earth in his last game, but he still is the quarterback 12 on the year. He still is, putting up anywhere from 18 to 20 points on his really good weeks. And that is something that you have to kind of keep an eye on. Goff and then May. Drake May is an interesting one. He has had 12, 17, 11, 20, and 21 points in his 5 games. So I should take out the 11. He didn't play all of that game. 21, 20, 17, and 12 points. So, it's going to kind of depend. He played a tough defense in Chicago. Rest of the season, maybe he can get to that 15 to 17 points per game and be a streaming guy, but who knows?
And the C tier, you're going to have a bunch of passing guys here that you really know you're going to get. Geno Smith, Matt Stafford, Herbert, Stroud. Herbert's on the up. Stroud is trending down. Geno and Stafford, more what you're going to get every single week from them. And then the D tier, I'll just close it out here with Caleb Williams, Trevor Lawrence, Tua, Rodgers, and Derek Carr. Not much to say about any of these guys outside of Lawrence potentially feared to maybe miss the rest of the season with that AC joint sprain. We'll want to keep monitoring that. Regardless, you don't really want to start these guys every single week.
For sure. And there you go. Those are rest of season rankings for fantasy football. Do us a huge favor, drop a like and make sure you're subscribed. Those 2 things will tell us you like this video. We can update our rest of season rankings for our video every week from now on if you like the video. So make sure you do that. Appreciate you guys so much. Thanks for watching. We'll see you later.